We are the Brothers Mahoney. I am Michael,
And I am James.
and I welcome you to another journey into Doctor Who. Today we're discussing the Genocide Machine, which is the seventh release in the monthly adventures of Big Finish, featuring the seventh Doctor, of course, being Sylvester McCoy, with Ace being Sophie Aldred. This was written by Mike Take and released in April 2000. It runs for about an hour and 55 minutes. The plot is as follows. The librarian Carl Sherratt is one of the wonders of the universe. It is also hidden from all but a few select species. The Doctor and Ace discover that the librarians have found a new way of storing data, a Whatworks facility, but the machine has attracted unwanted attention, and the Doctor soon finds himself pitted against his oldest and deadliest enemies, the Daleks.
I thought it was going to be the Macra.
There is, bruh.
Yeah, well, speaking of the Macra, though, this is the first time we've seen a classic Doctor Who enemy force in a Big Finish story, so that's a nice, exciting. Well, of course, it was going to be the Daleks. I mean, I guess it could have been something random like the Autan showing up in Rose, but yeah, no, it makes sense that it's the Daleks. And they sound just as charming as they always do. I believe we even get the pleasures of meeting a Dalek Supreme.
We also actually, I think, briefly heard the voice of the Dalek Emperor. So,
Oh yeah, we do have a very scary, deep voice. I do wonder if it's the same Dalek Emperor as we saw during the Time War, but I guess that's basically impossible to tell. I mean, I guess it's possible. Perhaps later on, I know that this, well, I shall discuss a bit later, it's kind of starts off a Dalek arc. So maybe during this Dalek arc, the Emperor dies or gets killed or something. So maybe it's just another Dalek Emperor who we see during the Time War in the Parting of the Ways to powder. But I thought it was fun to see a Dalek Emperor as well. Well, heroine anyway.
and that is true because this is sometimes considered the first part of sort of a collection of four stories in the main range with a subtitle Dalek Empire, and this later a spin-off range, Dalek Empire, which had how many seasons? What, four?
Yeah, around 4 or 5. I forget the specifics, honestly. But yeah, at least 4.
But yeah, this is the first one. I believe there's also a Dalek Empire, you could call them prequels, with both the sixth and fifth Doctors, and I believe even the eighth, right?
I think so, yes. I mean,
So,
we haven't listened to any of them yet, but
yeah, but
we've
I have a vague knowledge of some things coming up in the future, so that should be fun. But
yeah, I personally hope it's this some type of thought line we can follow. Even though the Doctors, of course, I think it's actually going to it's kind of reverse Doctor order until the eighth one. But hopefully, there's some thought line we can follow with the Daleks anyway, because they were talking out throughout this story about planning for some upcoming invasion.
yeah, and I'm not always the most interested in Dalek stories. I mean, it's nothing against the Daleks; they're a delightful species, and that's probably something that you don't hear too many people say. But they're not always the most interesting antagonists to me, just because we see them so often. But that said, I thought this story was pretty fun. I do enjoy the setting. It takes place on a jungle planet. There's a library, which is one of the biggest libraries in the universe. I mean, as the plot says, it's one of the wonders of the universe. But it's sort of hidden in time. To people who look at it, it sort of looks like ruins from what it would look like 2,000 or 3,000 years in the future, something like that. In fact, the Time Lords helped these librarians with shielding this library because of the amount of knowledge it has. It might just be dangerous for other species to go to. So it's sort of funny, and Ace gets sort of annoyed about this, that there's a library that has all of these books and all this information, but nobody knows about it. Nobody can actually go there. So yeah, there's information there, but it's not readily available for people. So their books are just never to be read. In fact, one of the librarians is like, read the books? So you be trolling?
That's not quite what they say. They phrase it as but read the books without get the books out dirty and damaged. No, no, no. Something
Yeah,
along those lines.
and that character, I believe he was the chief librarian, Algin, and he was,
I think it's just Algan.
yeah, that makes sense. Voiced by one Bruce Montague, and he played sort of prissy type character, sort of wound tight, concerned more about the safety of the books and such, as opposed to well, really anything else. He's a chief librarian of a library that has no customers, so sort of shows what his personality is like.
Yeah, he's very stiffy, very well, kind of ponderous. Only, as Michael said, only cares about the books.
I mean, somewhat pompous too. The Doctor gets along with him well enough. I think the Doctor tells Ace, well, he has a good heart anyway.
Yes.
So the Doctor's counts him among one of his many friend-type relationships. The character doesn't have much in the way of personality aside from his sort of pompous attitude until the end when we get a little more background on him. And that scene in itself, I think, is a pretty fun scene.
Yeah, so the story starts off, if I'm not mistaken. Well, it might start off with the Doctor and Ace finding some books he had accidentally taken from the library. So that makes the Doctor and Ace decide to go back. And I mean, I guess he's a Time Lord. He can kind of go back with an alpha, but I guess it's just going back within his own timeline. As is, again, time travelers, allowing to comprehend. But besides that, the first scene we get is actually a bunch of, I guess you could call them treasure hunters. They land on the planet of Kausarat because there's this monolith type thing. What do they call it? A ziggurat, I believe.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
A ziggurat, which is a type of tapped temple type thing. Which it's a word I've seen before, but I never actually knew what it was. And yeah, they're just the main leader of this group is Bev Tarrant. Oh, Tarrant. I actually forget which. It's probably Tarrant. And they just, they'll have a quick, easy, not a scan because it's like right there, but just taking the ziggurat, taking it with them and selling it. But things do not go quite as they planned because the ziggurat is not actually quite. Well, I mean, I guess it's a ziggurat, but it's more than it looks like, apparently.
And that is indeed the joy of the Daleks.
I don't think they have much joy, but I guess if they had a joy, that would be one of them.
Yeah, and Bev Tarrant's character, she loses, well, pretty much all of her crew once they encounter a Dalek. And you can imagine that she feels a bit guilty about that, especially since one of them is her larva. And she has some decent sequences throughout. She's not a character that they focus too much on, but she gets along decently well with Ace. She actually gets injured early on. So it's not really until, the last 2 episodes where she really actually has more stuff to do.
Yeah, she's a prisoner of the Daleks for a bit. She's very injured in after the first Dalek attack. So yeah, like episodes 3 and 4, she's actually able to do some things.
That's actually another good point because I think it's at the end of episode 1, Ace happens to run into Bev Tarrant, and well, she sees that she is injured, and Ace attempts to bring her back to the library. But on the way, they sort of get surrounded by Daleks and become prisoners of the Daleks, which the episode ends with they are prisoners of the Daleks, or the Doctor's companion is a prisoner of the Daleks. It was pretty playful.
Well, not playful to them, though, because I don't think I'd want to be a prisoner of a Dalek.
That's just because you don't want any fun in life.
I mean, I guess you could phrase it that way. I'm not sure I would, though.
The Daleks, though, are on this planet. It's not just happenstance. They, much like some other species, have interests in the contents of the library. Along with other species, they have tried a bit to get into the library, but because of the defenses set up by partially the Time Lords, they've been unable to. There's actually a sort of a fun discussion in which the Doctor asks, hey, have there been many species interested in trying to get into this library? Because again, though this is one of the quote-unquote great wonders of the universe, almost nobody really knows it exists, or if they do, it's more like a myth than anything. And he mentions some species being a bit more aggressive than others, including what turns out to be the Daleks, which immediately the Doctor thinks, well, if the Daleks tried to get in here and failed, they're probably not exactly gone.
Yeah, according to the Doctor, and he's quite right, of course, the Daleks don't just give up after a failed attempt, which is what the Chief Librarian said. Furthermore, the Chief Librarian referred to the Daleks as tiresome creatures, which, I mean, I guess you could call them that, but I don't think they would appreciate it.
Although, admittedly, I have to imagine the Daleks have been called far worse by far many other people.
No, the worst thing they've ever been called is tiresome creatures.
At least the Doctor's respectful to them. Later on in this story, the Doctor comes across some Daleks, and he's like, "Good afternoon, Daleks. How lovely to see you again." Nobody said that Sylvester McCoy was the gentlemanly Doctor.
This is very true. Although it's not very gentlemanly when in Remembrance of the Daleks he's, convincing one to commit suicide, but
I mean, not only that, but he also destroyed Carol,
yeah, that's also true.
which, and I'm sure this has been explained somewhere. It may have been somewhere new who, but Carol was destroyed in Remembrance of the Daleks. But in this story, and this story takes place after Survival, which is the last story of Classic Who, there's a reference to the Dalek Emperor who is Alan Carl, and in fact, they plan to capture the Doctor and bring him back to Skar for interrogation. So Skar apparently is back. Like I said, I'm sure it's been explained in some form. Maybe this technically takes place, even though it's...
Well, like I said, timeline things get really confusing. It could take place with Daleks before the destruction of Skaro, even though this Doctor's already caused the destruction of Skaro. But who knows? I mean, I believe one of the excuses I've seen floating around is that the Time War literally rewrites reality because of the type of war that it was. Planets that got destroyed just were like whole again the next day. And just cosmic mischief like that. Things that really sort of happened, but they did happen. Which is, I think, an excuse for like basically anything.
Yeah, and as James said earlier, the Dalek Emperor has a short discussion, and I mean, you can imagine what Dalek discussions are like. They're very short and to the point. They don't really say more than they need to. The Dalek Emperor has discussions with the Dalek Supreme, and the Emperor states that, quote, the Dalek invasion plans cannot be delayed. Apparently, getting into this library and stealing this information, which is made slightly easier because unlike what you might think of a library, you might have to go through every book, but there's actually like a repository of all the knowledge in a sort of water-based what works collection thingy.
Yeah, they didn't quite call it a thing. I think they called it a what works facility or something akin to that.
So the idea is that that contains all the knowledge of the library. So if they can download that into a Dalek, and they have some Daleks who are going to be used to try to receive that information. And the idea is if they can do that, they'll have a Dalek that pretty much knows everything, which will help them with whatever future plans of an invasion they might have. Naturally, the Doctor complicates their lives a bit, but that's one of the things the Doctor's pretty good at doing, complicating the lives of Daleks.
I don't really see why, because they only want to invade. Like, is that so wrong?
They might have a kindly rule, who's to say?
I don't know, I really just like the setting of the story. It takes place, as Michael said, in a library, but it's a library in the middle of a rainforest. It rains a lot. Well, I mean, it's a rainforest. It's just really cool imagery to imagine in your head.
And there's also creepy voices.
Yeah, Ace and Bav hear strange, whispery voices in the rain. And even the Doctor hears them at some point. It's, a small little mystery of what those are and what's going on with them. I like them, though. And in the end, well, I guess we shouldn't say, but in the end, maybe there's more to the planet of Khosrat than meets the eye or the ear.
Yeah, I really like the ending to this one. A lot of the Big Finish things we've listened to so far, this has only been the 7th one, but a lot of the stories we've listened to have Trist-like things going on in them, either dealing with characters or dealing with the situations they're in. And I mean, some of them, like Whispers of Terror, have been really good. The Fearmonger, which was another 7th Doctor story, was also pretty fun. And this one, it doesn't necessarily have what I would call a Trist, but it does have some things that sort of shines more light on some of the characters. And it's actually sort of a, I don't know, somewhat disturbing revelation about the planet of Khosrat toward the sort of last episode of this 4-part story.
Obviously, to save you from the spoilers, we won't go into that, but, it's only like, 350, 360. So, if you want to, like, hear how that goes, you could, I guess they're maybe not transcripts, but there are sites that go more into the plot. So, you could either use that or just, listen to it. Like we said, it's only about 2 hours long. So,
yeah, it does lead to a really good, I don't want to say outburst, because the 7th Doctor is generally pretty collected and, well, moderately calm. But the 7th Doctor has some pretty harsh words for someone, and that was, I think, a really fun scene. It's not too often, at least I don't think it's too often, yet you see the 7th Doctor get extraordinarily outraged, and he did beautifully here.
Yeah, he did, and he wasn't. The events that he found himself learning about were not ones that made him happy, to say the least.
But yeah, I would say that the Genocide Machine, which is on a side note quite an apt title, even though it might take a bit to understand exactly what it's referencing in this toy. But I would say the Genocide Machine does a lot of things right, even though Daleks aren't really my go-to when it comes to, I guess, interesting Doctor Who antagonists. Like James said, the Satin being a rainforest in the library that no one knows about on an unpopulated planet, it just has a really fun setting. In fact, when it first introduces us to Bev and her group who are attempting to break into the ziggurat, it has sort of almost a creepy vibe to it. Like James said, they're just in this rainforest, bunch of everybody's seen pictures of rainforests most likely. Just going through a rainforest, attempting to break into someplace. They get more than they bargain for. Most of them end up dead. It's just a fun idea, and I think this story does well with the setting.
Yeah, I think the sighting might be my favorite thing about it. I mean, as for side characters, there's really only two. I mean, I guess there's technically three, but one is kind of the character himself is a joke, but Augen is a very talkative. He's also very pompous. So he has an assistant. Do you happen to remember what the assistant's name was?
Since he got like maybe 5 words total, I do not.
Yeah. So Augen has an assistant with him who he claims that the doctor is very talkative and who never works with his hours talking. But we almost never hear him say a single thing. Every time he opens his mouth to speak, Augen just interrupts him.
Yeah, it's sort of a nice little funny, amusing element in this toy, which sort of goes to show, again, it sort of adds to Augen's character. And you can sort of understand why Ace can't really stand him.
Yeah, no, Ace has, Ace, talks to him. Well, I mean, the doctor's there too, of course. But Ace, has a discussion for about 5 minutes with him, and then she just leaves. Just goes, she wants to walk back through the rainforest to the TARDIS. Because she can't stand the guy, and honestly, I can't blame her. He's like one of those old college professors who you just couldn't stand, like one of the taffy academic types.
Yeah, and Ace does have some pretty good scenes throughout. She actually gets cloned at one point by the Daleks. So when the Doctor's able to find her, he thinks he's finding Ace, but of course he's finding a clone of Ace. I suspect that he knew something was off pretty early on. And that actually leads to another fun scene when Bev and Ace are sort of left in the library and the Doctor takes Augen out into the jungle because the Doctor wants to look at one of these ziggurats. So it's just the Doctor and this librarian sort of making the way through a jungle to look at this old structure. Again, that's a short scene, but I think it's a fun scene. I mean, any of the scenes that take place in the jungle, I think, are generally more interesting than the ones that take place in the library, just because the idea of this rainforest jungle type place with mysterious whispering voices in the background. I mean, who doesn't think that sounds fun?
Well, perhaps Augen doesn't think it sounds fun, but
Well, yeah, Augen is one of those types of guys who spends like his entire life indoors. I forget exactly how long he's been the head librarian of this library, but it's been at least, like multiple decades, I would think.
at the very least, I'd say at least 20.
So he's not really the outdoorsy type. And to be fair, if the outdoors in questions was like a rainforest or jungle, I can understand that being the outdoorsy type.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind if there was no insects, but that's probably not going to be the case. I'm just thinking about the scene at the beginning of Arachnophobia, honestly, and that would be terrifying. By the way, that's a really good movie. You should watch it.
Yeah, 1990 movie Arachnophobia is some high quality stuff. Although, if you are someone who does not much care for our eight-legged friends, it may not be the best movie choice.
No, but I will say, when it comes to spiders, much better than arachnids in the UK. Like, by 4,000 miles at least.
Although if arachnids in the UK had actually been like arachnids in the rainforest, it might have been more fun.
As long as it wasn't written by Chris Chibnall.
Oh snap, it's getting real up in here. But yeah, I enjoyed. No, I just think the Genocide Machine's the best thing we've listened to. But overall, I enjoyed it. But before you sort of finalize our thoughts on this one of our favorite portions of our discussion is talking about exactly where this fits in the Doctor's timeline.
Yeah, the TARDIS Wiki is an amazing source for all things Doctor Who, and they have personal timeline pages for each Doctor. And, it includes everything from the, of course, classic series, new series, comic books, comic strips, even counts that one or two video games that exist out there. just because they can. And of course, the audios are the books from the various ranges. It's the expanded universe of Doctor Who is so large that it makes things like this fascinating. And so, just to place this in perspective, the Genocide Machine, with of course the Seventh Doctor, takes place after Survival, as far as I know, audio stories do with starring the Seventh Doctor and Ace. I'd
And
be
not just audios toys, but pretty much other books too, right?
Yeah, I'd be very surprised if there's any bit of extended media starring the Seventh Doctor and Ace that did take place after Survival. Just because, I mean, if you're going to do that, why not throw it after Survival?
I know there are some audios later on that have the Seventh Doctor with Mal, and those should be fascinating.
Yeah, that would be a very interesting thing to listen to. This reason Mal was really, felt very underused in the classic series. And one book I'm really looking forward to reading is Millennial Rights with the Sixth Doctor and Mal. I've read a bit of the beginning of that and it looks really well written. But alas, this is about Millennial Rights. So yeah, this takes place after Survival, and it takes place in between the very last Seventh Doctor audio we discussed, the film Mango, which both Margot and I liked pretty well. I think Margot liked it more than I did, but either way, it came out pretty well. And there was a BBC Past Doctor Adventure novel entitled Prime Time, which came out in 2000. Apparently has the Master in it, which is nice. And so yeah, and it actually name tags, references this adventure. It mentions apparently Ace recollects the library on Kausarat. So yeah, so this takes place in between another audio and a book from 2000. So that's just really fun to me.
It's nice to see references to Big Finish in books. Anytime a type of media goes out of the way to say another type of media is, quote unquote canon, it's just nice to see. It just adds to a sort of a continuity of the Doctor Who universe.
Yeah, which it is generally kind of lacking in. I mean, it exists within their own media frames, like the comics reference each other, the, of course, classic series reference each other, New Who references the classic series. A lot of times you don't see a lot, I mean, of course, and I guess the audio things reference classic series and really anything they want to. But it's interesting to see books reference an audio thing. Or it would be really strange to see a New Who thing reference an audio thing or anything that wasn't in the classic series.
I will say, I think it's somewhat disappointing that some New Who sort of dismisses, either the books or Big Finish. And I'm thinking specifically of Power of the Doctor, where it brings back a couple of old faces. And we know that the circumstances they list in Power of the Doctor don't necessarily match up with what we know from these other forms of media. I think even at one point, I should say my knowledge of extended Doctor Who media is somewhat limited, but it's my understanding that somewhere in Doctor Who extended media, Tegan is made gay.
Yeah, honestly, I believe that might only have been in a webcast written by Russell T Davies. I think it was Farewell Sarah Jane, and things like that. I mean, of course, the TARDIS wiki counts as canon, but I mean, who knows? Honestly, it's Doctor Who. Really, anything could be canon. But I don't know if that came in any place besides that. Maybe it did.
To be fair, that's a fair point. I guess any excuse I have to slam Power of the Doctor, I can do. I guess a more important thing, and actually something I quite applaud, was the short episode, mini-sode, I guess I'd call it, Night of the Doctor, which showcases the Eighth Doctor and his decision to sort of regenerate into what we know as the War Doctor, which is when that came out, that was fantastic to see. One, because it's one of only a handful of times we actually see the Eighth Doctor in action, aside from the 1996 TV movie. And toward the end of that, he actually lists a bunch of the companions he has had, companions that we have never seen. If you've just watched Classic Who and New Who, we've never seen these companions that he mentions. So that does add some validity to these other adventures the Eighth Doctor has.
Yeah, it's one of the, I think, only times in TV media, I guess technically that's probably a webcast, at least it aired online, but it's one of the only times in something like that where it name drops characters who appeared in either the novels or the audios, because I believe it mentions at least Charlie and probably, I never remember the other woman's name.
Would it be Lucy?
Yes, Lucy. I guess I can't say, I know it name drops Charlie. it probably name drops Lucy as well.
But it was just nice to see. So yeah, it's always good to see some of this stuff conformed in other media. So the fact that the events of Genocide Machine are brought up later in the book, it warms my bitter heart.
Overall, the Genocide Machine is a fun enough story to listen to. It wouldn't make one of my favorites so far, but honestly, I don't think I've heard one that's blown me away yet. Most of what I've heard so far has ranged from an enjoyable story to listen to and to think about to a bit on the more boring side. This one's kind of a bit in the middle for me. I mean, I liked it, and I thought it was exciting to hear the Daleks again. Yes, I have a lot of Dalek fatigue because the new series uses them way, way too much. Look at the fourth Doctor's time in the classic series. Tom Baker was the Doctor for 7 years, and the Daleks appeared in 2 series. That's it. Nowadays, the Daleks appear, it seems, once a season at least. I think it devalues, one, it makes the universe seem smaller for Doctor Who, and it just makes the writers have less creativity if they can just reuse the Daleks every year or so.
Although we should say that you could argue maybe one of the positive things about the 11th season, Jodie Whittaker's first season, is that it did not bring back any previous antagonists. It just tried to do completely new things.
There's nothing good to say about the 11th season.
Oh, it's getting real up in here. I think, honestly, the idea would have been just fine. It's just that the writing itself wasn't particularly good.
Yeah, the writing, the acting, the directing.
But the idea,
everything.
Well, the idea of having a complete season, bringing back no familiar faces, is a bold move. So yeah. in some ways, it should be applauded, but it just wasn't executed particularly well.
No, it was not.
Yeah, personally, I thought Genocide Machine was pretty fun. I'm not sure how it ranked against other Big Finish releases we've listened to, but the setting was fun. I think it might have probably been a little longer than it needed to be.
Yeah, I got the same feeling too.
But overall, I thought it was pretty good. You got some good Dalek action, sort of an amusing scene, which is actually sort of tragic. But with this Dalek, it's sort of used to try to collect all the information from this Whatworks contraption, and it sort of goes insane. And you can just sort of hear the Dalek shrieking. So it's sort of amusing, but it's actually sort of disturbing. Of course, the Daleks aren't really big on emotion, so they just want to try to do it again and get it right this time.
Yeah, I mean, the Daleks basically don't care about things like sacrificing. If one Dalek, goes insane and starts shooting things up, well, then they just use another Dalek. It's really, it doesn't matter to them in the slightest. It doesn't even seem to matter to the Daleks who are pitting themselves up to be the next in line, because they just don't care. They just see it as their duty.
Yeah, the Daleks don't have much of individual personality. They pretty much just want to advance the Dalek cause, which, I guess for a species like the Daleks, it's a good quality to have. But yeah, it's probably not the type of society I'd want to be part of.
You would like to have an ice talk?
Well, actually, that part might be okay. They do have a good look to them. But yeah, overall, I'd say Genocide Machine, it's a pretty solid story. It's not a favorite, but it's certainly a story you can listen to, have fun with, especially if you're like a big fan of Daleks. And if you really do enjoy the occasional Dalek story, either in Classic Who or New Who, like James said, this is just, under $4, like maybe $3.60. And I have no idea what they'll translate to over in euros. Yeah, it's cheap, it's fun. Plus, the 7th Doctor has always been one of my favorite Doctors, so that adds to it. Ace, of course, being one of my favorite companions, along with Jamie and Perry. So yeah, it's a fun TARDIS team. It's a pretty fun story. You get some good Dalek action. It's not amazing, but I think it's pretty well-rounded. So, I mean, why not? Of course, as always, we're interested to hear your thoughts on the story if you've listened to it.
Yeah, and I especially look forward to the continuation of this Dalek arc that this is supposed to be the first part of. I think that sounds very promising, and I think that's something that Big Finish should be able to really do, go above and beyond what the classic series was ever really able to do, honestly.
Yes, so that should be fun. Even though there is a bit of Dalek fatigue, I feel generally most Dalek stories are pretty fun. There's only a handful that I don't particularly care for. But I mean, there's a reason that they're one of the most well-known antagonists of the Doctor. So yeah, Genocide Machine, does the kid say, #good stuff.
And hopefully not #genocide, that might be not a good hashtag to use. Yeah. But ignoring horrible hashtags, what's coming up next, Michael?
Yeah, next is, amusingly, we are going back to New Who with 6th episode of season 1 being Dalek. So there's some nice relation here. Dalek, of course, is quite a classic episode as far as New Who is concerned. First time we see the Daleks in modern Who, so that should be fun to revisit.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, it's also a basically a readaptation of an audio story we've not listened to yet, Jubilee, which is a 6th Doctor story with Dr. Eveline Smythe, actually. And of course, it's not a complete adaptation. It, of course, changes things around. But the ideas are apparently the same, or so I've heard. And it has the same writer as well, so that helps.
Yeah, Daleks, an episode I remember being pretty good. Been a while since, well, I've seen, I'm not sure when the last time James saw it was, but I remember it being pretty fun, so that should be fun to get to. As always, though, we hope that you enjoyed listening. If you are all interested, we do have a treat day at Brothers Mahoney. If you have any questions or just want to chat about Doctor Who things that maybe we haven't discussed here, a lot of that being New Who that we just haven't gotten to and won't get to for quite some time. So yeah, if you're interested, we have a treat day. But as always, we have been the Brothers Mahoney. I'm Michael.
And I am James.
Hope you have a pleasant night. Thanks for listening.